I'm Yashvi, and today I'll be explaining about smart contracts, dApps, and how I built one. But before I start, let me tell you a story. This is Maria, a poor woman in Uganda who wants to start her own handcraft business. But to buy all her required material and set up a store, she needs some fixed capital or money. She tries to get loans from the banks in the nearby city, but it requires extensive paperwork and documentation, and she isn't educated enough to know about it all. She then turns to a local moneylender who agrees to give her money at a very high interest rate. She provides a collateral or security and is expected to get the money in return. Only the lender has a physical copy or record of the contract. But here's what happens. The lender denies her the funds, does not return her collateral, and destroys all records of the contract. With little knowledge about pursuing legal action, she finds herself further pushed into poverty, and her business never comes to be. No, I'm not intending to tell a sad story here, but this is reality. The example I told here was very simple, but each year millions of dollars are lost due to contract breaches. And this is where smart contracts come into play.
This interesting idea that Nick Szabo came up with about 25 years ago that was called a smart contract.
What you think about smart contracts that we're seeing now, are they going to revolutionize everything?
That's right, they're going to take the prize away.
Let's talk about smart contracts.
Smart contracts.
Smart contracts.
A smart contract is basically a computer program that executes itself automatically on a blockchain network when certain predefined conditions or criteria are met. They function on an if or when then basis. If or when action X happens, then execute action Y. Most importantly, they are irreversible once deployed. This way, smart contracts eliminate almost all possibilities of a breach in contract. Now, let me explain what dApps are. A dApp, or a decentralized application, is basically a type of distributed open source software application that runs on a peer-to-peer blockchain network rather than on a single computer. Hence the name decentralized. Multiple types of dApps exist, such as decentralized exchanges or DEXs, social media dApps, gaming dApps, etc. Wait, so how do smart contracts and dApps work together? After the deployment of the contract, the deployed smart contract is connected or integrated into the dApp on the blockchain platform, which incorporates the smart contract's functions into the dApp's user interface and backend logic. So, what have you built? I built a simple counter dApp in which users can connect their Web3 wallet and increment or decrement the value of the counter from the original value, which is 0. The owner of the dApp will also be able to reset the value of the counter back to 0. Okay, let's get to the technical part. I wrote my code on VS Code and used Forge as my development environment. This is my contract.sol file. First, I set two public variables uint256 and address. Then I wrote my constructor function in which I set the initial value of the counter to be equal to 0 and the owner to be equal to message.sender. Then I wrote the modifier function, which would be callable only by the owner at the time of deployment, in which the owner has to equal message.sender. Then I wrote my two most important functions, which are the increment and decrement functions, both callable publicly. However, the decrement function can only be used if the existing value of the counter is greater than 0, or else the dApp would display counter cannot be negative. Then I wrote my reset function, which would be callable only by the owner, in which the value of the counter would be set back to 0. Finally, I wrote my getCounter function. Then I ran npx thirdweb deploy Mumbai, which deployed my contract on the Mumbai network. Okay, so I was done with my smart contract. Now I had to build the front end, or the dApp. I basically ran npx thirdweb create app in my Windows terminal and named my dApp counter app. Then I created a new API key on thirdweb, which gave me a client ID, and I pasted that client ID in my .env file. Next, I also added some styling to make my Dapp look nicer.
This is my home.module.css file under my styles folder, in which I've added some width, weight, font, and size, and a bunch of other things to my button containers, headings or titles, and text.
Now let's come to the main code of the Dapp, the index.tsx file. This is where we code what will be displayed to the user on the Dapp.
First, I imported connect wallet, web3 button, contract address, and a bunch of other statements from different libraries and folders, and then I defined my constants. Next, I set connect wallet button in my main container, and as my heading or h1, I wrote country Dapp. Then I wrote my decrement and increment functions, which when clicked would increase or decrease the value of the counter. However, if the decrement function is used and the value of the counter is already 0, then error would be displayed on the Dapp. Finally, I wrote the reset function, which is callable only by the owner, which means that the wallet address of the user would have to match the wallet address of the owner.
Now that you've seen my code, let me finally show you what the front end looks like.
So this is how the Dapp would be displayed. The first thing to do would be to connect a wallet. So I'll be connecting my MetaMask wallet. As you can see, I can get the increment function, the decrement function, as well as the reset function, since I am the owner of the contract, so the wallet address of the owner matches the wallet address of the user. If I increment the counter, I pay a certain gas fee, confirm my transaction, and I get counter incremented. The value of the counter becomes 1. I can reset the value back to 0 as well, since it is callable by the owner. As you can see, the value of the counter got back to 0. And now if I want to decrement the counter, it shows error since the counter cannot be negative.
The Dapp I built was very simple, but smart contracts can be used in multiple fields, like borrowing and lending of money or DeFi, voting systems, insurance contracts, legal agreements, supply chains, and more. Maria was just one person, but blockchain and smart contracts could positively impact billions of lives.